Hello. Hello. Salam.
Okay. I think my mic is not working. Is it? Okay. Distinguished delegates, excellencies, esteemed guests, and fellow youth advocates, welcome to this pivotal session on youth lead, governance for human rights, peace and security, and political processes. I am Manal Birani, and alongside my colleague, Mohammed Falfoul, we have the honor of guiding today's session. As the Youth and Culture Manager for Africa Aero Foundation, I stand before you not just as a moderator, but as a testament to the transformative power of youth engagement in the global affairs. Our foundation serves as a dynamic bridge between two continents, Africa and Europe, amplifying the voices of youth and catalyzing action on the pressing issues of our time. We gather here today at a historic juncture, the Summit of the Future Action Days. This is not merely a conference. It is a clarion call for a new era of global cooperation, with youth at the very core. It is our mission to deeply align with the Summit's Pact of the Future and to forge stronger partnerships, to innovate governance structures, and to place aspirations and the aspirations and capabilities of youth at the center of our shared future. In my work, I've witnessed firsthand the untapped potential of young people revolutionizing policymaking and driving sustainable change. From the bustling cities of Europe to the very vibrant communities in Africa, young leaders are already shaping the future. They're already reshaping the landscape of governance, human rights, and peace building. Yet we know the barriers still exist. And that's why we're here today, to break them and to build a more inclusive global order.
Salam, my name is Mohammed Falfoul. I come from Tunisia, where I have spent over a decade working passionately on youth development, advocacy, and policy reform. I'm a youth advocate with education above all, and also I have the privilege of serving as a consultant of the Ministry of Youth in Tunisia, where we are crafting strategies to empower young people and amplify their voices, governance, and also decision-making. Throughout my career, also as a child psychiatrist in training, I have worked closely with youth-led movements and organizations, nationally and internationally, to drive impactful change, whether in education reform, policy advocacy. I've seen firsthand the potential of young people to shape the future. Today, I'm excited to moderate this panel and explore how we can enhance youth engagement in national governments to build more inclusive, accountable, and responsive systems. The objective of this panel will be to focus on turning the commitments from the Pact of the Future into actions, especially Action 36 and 37, which emphasize the importance of meaningful youth participation and decision-making at all levels. We'll be talking about how we can ensure that youth aren't just included as a formality, but are genuinely empowered to lead.
This session will be divided in 3 segments. We will have 2 intergenerational dialogues. The first focused on youth participation at a national level. We will have a second one focused on youth participation at international level. And we will have a segment where we will open the floor for interventions from different stakeholders.
We'll go briefly reading the 2 actions that we'll be talking about, Action 36 and 37. So Action 36 is about the recognition of young people's contribution to the advancement of human rights, sustainable development, and peace and security in their own countries, and the importance of their meaningful participation at the national levels. Decisions to support the establishment of mechanisms for youth engagement at the national level, consider establishing intergenerational dialogues, address challenges and barriers to participation, including for youth in vulnerable situations, ensure capacity building support for youth organizations.
As you all know, that the Chapter 4, which is mainly focused on youth, includes these 2 actions that we will be discussing today, but advocating for as well. And the second action that I will be discussing will be the Action 37, according to the fifth amendment of the Pact. The 37th action will be focused on the recognition of the progress made in ensuring meaningful youth engagement in the UN and the commitment to strengthen youth engagement in intergovernmental processes. Decision to promote meaningful engagement of young people in UN bodies and processes, encourage inclusion of youth of the UN Youth Fund to boost the participation of youth representatives from developing countries, continue to develop core principles for meaningful, representative, inclusive, and safe youth engagement in intergovernmental processes and the work of the UN. Mohammed, who is an example of youth participation at the national level in Tunisia through his role as a consultant of the Ministry of Youth, will take the lead on the next dialogue, and I think he couldn't be a better example.
Thank you. So now let's meet the fantastic lineup panelists we have today. This session is diverse not only in the topics we'll cover up, but with the experience our panelists bring. We'll bring here from both senior leaders and young innovators who've already managed to break through barriers and make their mark in governance and peace processes. First, we will welcome a lawyer with a background in gender and human rights. She is part of the Directive Commission of the Organización Argentina de Jóvenes para las Naciones Unidas and is an international steering group representative at United Network of Young Peace Builders. Please welcome Galia Kedmian. Our second panelist will be the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Community Development in Zambia. Please welcome Ms. Kamba Kawandami. Welcome. The third will be the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Community Development, the founding director of Juventud Politica y de Saralo and Promisex Advisory, Ms. Mauricio Pajora from Peru. Then the Deputy Foreign Minister of Uruguay, member of the WEDE, Network of Young Decision Makers of Club de Madrid, His Excellency, Mr. Nicolas Albertoni. Then the Deputy Mayor of London for Environmental and Energy, Trustee at the London Marathon Foundation, and My Life, My Say from the UK, Mr. Miti Koban. And a Youth Engagement Officer at the African Leaders Malaria Alliance, member of the Board of Directors of the Imaria Leadership Initiatives, and member of the first cohort of the OHCHR EAA Youth Advisory Board from Tanzania, Petridier Paul. So the key questions we'll be exploring today is what can your organization, government, or entity do to advance youth-led governments for human rights, peace, security, and political processes? We are here to listen to actions-oriented solutions and concrete examples that we can carry forward after the summit. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to say their thoughts, and we ensure that it's time for an open dialogue. Afterward, I encourage everyone to be candid and action-focused. This is an open space where all ideas are welcome. Also, our colleague over there, Yasmin, who over here will be helping us being on time with reminding us with a yellow card when there's only 1 minute left and the red card when there's only a few seconds and when the time is over. So my first question will be to Mr. Mete Koban, and I will ask you, based on your experience, what challenges do young people face in participating in the political processes, and what helped you overcome these challenges and become a young politician?
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be here, to be representing London, the greatest city in the world. Of course, we're here, the home of diplomacy here in the United Nations. Look, 68% of people currently in the UK don't feel like politics in the country works for them. And that's hardly surprising because if you think about it, people like me in many Western democracies, people that look and sound like me, aren't really involved in politics. There's a huge issue of representation when you look at the lack of women in politics, lack of black global majority communities who participate in democracy. The other thing is, of course, we know that young people in the context of the UK aren't educated about democracy, and in many Western democracies, actually. And it's not that they don't care about politics. Of course they care about issues, whether they've got a decent roof over their head or a job that pays them basic respect or dignity. The problem is whether they see traditional forms of politics as a vehicle to address the issues that they care about. And so that's why My Life My Say, which is one of the organizing organizations behind this important event today, when we ran into the general election in 2024 in July, our whole approach to engagement is meeting young people where they are. And what I mean by that is where did they go to in their social, day-to-day, and digital lives and think about how we could connect with them. So we engaged 488,000 young people to register to vote, broke the records in the UK to register to vote in the run-up to the election. And that was because we had some very interesting partnerships. One of them was Tinder. So if you're on the app, you're swiping left or right, looking for a date, you could swipe right and you could register to vote. Because we know lots of young people are currently engaging on dating apps, looking for a date. Through the transport networks and through advertisement. We have a partnership that we ran historically with Starbucks, something called Democracy Cafe. It's about reinventing the 17th century concept of talking about politics over coffee, over a Frappuccino. And you'd be surprised how much the Frappuccino does invite people to come along. Partnership with Premier League football clubs. Again, if you go to a Premier League game, you're able to scan a QR code and register to vote. Now, the point I'm making is the reason why this is important is because the new generation of young people, and I don't classify myself in that no more. I'm 32, as much as I'd love to say that I'm still young, is they engage in society in a very, very different way. And it's so important in that context that you're really part of a way that actually appeals to you. So look, my message here today is really to say, I think it's enough time for people like me, who are politicians, to really dictate to young people how we should engage in democracy. I'm very interested in co-led, co-design, co-produce solutions, and that's one of the things that I'm working on in London, to put young people at the heart of shaping and making London a greener city in the world. And I'm really excited to be part of this conversation, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Mary. You reminded me of, there is a saying in Tunisia, what we say, "Wake بعصرك." It means like be updated on what is happening in your own world, be updated on what's happening with your own time, and this is a great example of what you brought here. Thank you very much. I will direct the next question to Petri Diepol. In your experience as a youth activist and a human rights defender who managed to advance the rights of women and girls in Tanzania, what can young people do to claim their right to participate in the decision-making processes in their country, and what support do they need for that?
Thank you. Thank you.
You can always switch if it doesn't work.
Sorry. Switching on issue. Thank you so much, Mohammed. And greetings, everyone, all protocols observed. So ideally, my name's Apitrida Paul, and I'm a member of the first cohort of the OHCHR EAA Youth Advisory Board and Board of Directors for Imara Leadership Initiative. In my community, I work as a girls' rights advocate, advocating for rights of young people to have access to education. As a frontline human rights defender, I've actually seen a lot of young people in my community not have access to education, particularly education about their human rights. And this has actually enabled me to advocate for their rights through several means. I led an online petition that gathered 100,000 signatures to allow teenage mothers to resume schooling. And this was based on a decree that was announced by former president, the late president of Tanzania, to ban teenage mothers from resuming schooling. I actually worked together with UN agencies, civil societies, youth alliances, and NGOs so as to get the job done. And this actually led to a change of decision whereby right now in my country, teenage mothers can actually have access to schooling through alternative education pathways. But most importantly, I think through this whole process, I got to have access to several roles. I've been in the advisory board for the African Union Youth Advisory Council, appointed by the commissioner himself, the chairperson of the African Union. But the most important aspect is being part of the youth board for the OHCHR EAA, whereby in this role with my fellow board members, they're actually there. In this role, we actually developed a youth rights advocacy toolkit, which was launched as part of the youth empowerment system for the United Nations. And with this, I have 3 particular recommendations. I would like to recommend that we all work together in youth alliances to ensure that human rights issues are actually developed and adhered at national level. But also, I'd like to actually recommend the United Nations to ensure that we work in partnerships and youth are not only beneficiaries, but we walk the talk and work together. And lastly, I would like to recommend that member states, we actually work together to ensure that human rights issues are included in the education curriculum, so as we can all be able to champion for our rights once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it works. Thank you very much. A very wide experience, very humbling messages. Thank you very much. Knowing you from EAA and above, it's very great to hear from you. Thank you. And now I will address my next question to His Excellency, Mr. Nicolas Albertini. And how does the political and social environment in Latin America affect youth participation in decision-making processes? Oh, I think we'll switch again.
No,
oh,
here it's working.
now.
Okay. First of all, thank you. I'm glad to be here today, and also as a member of the Young Decision Makers group of the Club de Madrid. Here I see the Secretary General, Marilena Agüero. That is, as a member of this team, we are working a lot on how democracy has to be relevant for Latin America. So that's why I'm mentioning that, because it's part of my answer indeed. As the youngest member of the cabinet of the strongest democracy in Latin America, but also the 14th democracy in the world, I think, and I'm glad to give also a youth perspective of how relevant is, politics in Latin America, and even youth participation. We are 9% of the whole population around the world, but we have 1/3 of the homicides. At the same time, Latin America is an emerging region, but we are still with so many political challenges, as it is, for example, inequality. We are still the most unequal region in the world. And my main point here, related to the question that you just asked, is at the end of the day, I don't know if it is a challenge for young decision makers to be related to politics. But the main challenge we have as a politicians right now is to communicate that politics is the bridge to solve the solutions we have. We have so many new ideas and so many new things to do as young decision makers, NGOs, that is a great part of, great things to do. But at the end, politics is still an instrument that we have to use. And the main challenge we have is to communicate that political outcome, because we are doing a lot. At least I'm talking from my government, but I know that many other governments in Latin America are doing a lot on how to face the challenges, the social challenges we have. But we are still, having a small participation of young decision makers in politics in general. I just saw a poll a few weeks ago, a comparative with some years ago of an important poll in Latin America, that is Latino Barometer. Even in a country like mine, that is a strong democracy, in the region, some years ago, the answer of a tricky question that was, and if you could be open to an authoritarian regime, if it's resolved your problems, almost 40% answer that they would be open to that. So this shows that at the end, we are becoming more selfish, in the way we see politics. And I don't know if it is only a challenge of politics, but also a challenge of youth decision makers, how we can see, that at the end we have to collaborate to solve the problem and the challenges we have. So that said, I think it's a two-way problem, once again, not only from the political side that we normally push themselves to do better, and we are trying to do that, but also how youth think about politics, and also how they think cooperatively to solve the problems we have.
Thank you, thank you. A good friend of mine always said that everything is politics, so either do it the right way or, so since we're every day doing it. Thank you. So I'll be addressing my question to Mr. Mauricio. In addition to roles in national government and public entities, you also have extensive grassroots experience working on a number of issues in Peru, including promoting youth participation at local, national, regional, and international levels, and educating young Peruvians about their civic and political rights. Given these experiences, what should be done to guarantee that national youth consultancies are independent and have a real influence on decision making?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you
Permítame
very
hablar
much.
en
If I
español
may, I'd
en
like
esta
to speak
ocasión.
in Spanish.
Y desde Perú, justamente
And
creo que uno de los retos que
I
estamos
think in
viviendo,
Peru,
sobre
one of the
todo en un
challenges that we
proceso
are
de
seeing
pospandemia,
is
ese
in the
reto de involucrar no
post-pandemic
solamente a la
period
juventud, sino a las
is
juventud y a las adolescencias en estos procesos de participación.
the participation
Creo
of
que
young
además
people
también por el
in
conflicto
these
y las situaciones
processes, and because
políticas
of conflict
internas que
and the
hemos tenido en
internal
nuestro territorio,
domestic political
es
situations
sumamente
we've had in the
latente en que
country,
tengamos que
it's
exigir
very
justicia, sobre
important that
todo
we
sobre las
get
vidas que
justice,
salieron a protestar,
particularly
vidas
with
jóvenes
regard
que
to
exigieron justicia para
young
justamente
people
exigir
who
que
have
tengamos
asked for justice
nuestras voces
so
en los
that we
espacios de toma de
can
decisión.
ensure that our
Creo que
voices
uno
are
de los retos
heard.
que tenemos
One
en
of the
nuestro
challenges
país,
that we
el
have in
primero
our
ligado al
country,
tema de fortalecer y
the
acompañar
first
justamente
relates
a que más
to,
jóvenes y adolescentes
ensuring that
se organicen,
more young people can
puedan
get
estar en
organized,
estos espacios,
and
no
so they can
solamente de
take part in
incidencia
these
local,
fora,
sino que vayan
not just at the
trascendiendo en
local
las demandas
level,
que
but
justamente en los territorios
they can-
ahorita
so that
se
they
generan por los
can,
diversos procesos que tenemos.
pass on
Cabe
the,
mencionar, en
demands that
este caso mi
people have.
país tiene una gran diversidad
my
y
country
de
has
hecho eso
great
contempla también
diversity,
el gran enfoque que tenemos en
and
tema de la defensa de los derechos LGTBI, el tema de la
we
población
are focused
afrodescendiente,
on,
el
the
tema de las
rights of
comunidades
those of African
indígenas.
descent, indigenous
Antes de
peoples,
venir, hasta el día de ayer
LGBTI,
todavía no teníamos
and,
una solución,
before I
digamos,
came
esencial y práctica que
yesterday,
pueda atender el tema de los bosques que se han
we were
quemado de
still
manera
talking
casi en
about
todo el
the
territorio
forests.
peruano
We've had a lot
y
of
que de
forest
alguna otra
fires, and we
manera
still don't
esto
have a
también
solution to deal with
atenta
this.
contra la vida de las adolescencias y
And
juventudes.
those
¿Y
kinds
por
of
qué
things affect
enfatizamos
the
que se
lives of
pueda
young
apoyar y
people.
acompañar a las organizaciones juveniles de
And
base? Porque es
youth,
ahí en donde están las
organizations
buenas
need to be
prácticas y
supported.
las
That's where the
experiencias,
good
en
practices
donde
and
cómo podemos darle
experiences
solución
are.
a
That's where
cosas
we
de
can
primera
find
mano y que
solutions
son
to
muchas
concrete
veces ajenos
problems,
a
and
los
very
ojos del Estado.
often the
Y
state
además
doesn't
es
see those
porque
problems.
necesitamos acompañar a las juventudes y a las
we
adolescencias en
want
ese proceso que
to
se llama
help young
participación,
people in
porque
this
muchas veces
process
decimos
of
ya que participe
participation.
y
Very often we
esté
say,
en el
well,
micrófono, pero no hay
participate,
todo un
put a
acompañamiento
microphone
que
in
debe
front
darse de
of
manera
someone, but it
sostenida en
needs
el
more
antes,
than that,
durante y
so that
después en
they
esos
can have
procesos.
sustained
Y
participation
un
in all
tema
of these
que es también un
processes.
eje transversal,
And something
que
that's
es que
cross-cutting
hagamos que
here
estos espacios, y yo debo
is
agradecer
that,
porque además antes de venir a este espacio
before
teníamos
coming to this,
un espacio con la misión permanente del
meeting,
Perú ante
we
las
had a
Naciones Unidas que por
meeting with the
primera vez en la
permanent
historia
mission
hemos
of
podido lograr
Peru.
tener
That's the first
un
time in
espacio en
history that
donde
we've been
el
able
Estado,
to,
la sociedad civil
have a meeting
juvenil
where
y en
young
este
civil
espacio con Naciones
society
Unidas
has been
podamos
able to
tener en
meet,
conjunto un proceso único que
together
justamente no habíamos
at the
tenido
United
creo en las
Nations,
últimas décadas. Y con
with,
ello es porque también
the
queremos
Peruvian
involucrar a
mission.
que las
We haven't had
adolescencias
that in
puedan ser
previous
parte de este
years.
pacto del futuro.
We
Son
want
ellos quienes
young
van a
people to
tomar las
be
riendas de
part
este
of the pact of
proceso
the
que más
future.
adelante,
It's
así
young
estemos
people that are going to take
nosotros
the
en el
reins of
poder,
this
así estemos
process.
nosotros en los puestos de toma de decisiones, es buscar que tengamos
need
la
to be,
garantía plena
part of
para
the
que en ello
decision-making
podamos tener la
process.
fortaleza de lo que
And
esperamos, no solamente como
only
Perú,
in
sino
that
también el
way
tema de
will
una
we
América
in
Latina que
Peru
sea
and
más
also in
unida y más
Latin
fuerte en
America
el tema de
will
la
we be
defensa de los
able
derechos.
to be
Sin
much more united in
democracia
defending
no hay derechos
human
humanos,
rights. There are no
sin
human
derechos
rights
humanos
without,
no hay juventud.
democracy,
Tenemos
and
que trabajar en
without,
eso. Gracias.
democracy, there's no young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for stressing the importance of that we as youth are main stakeholders and we have to educate ourselves, we have to organize ourselves, we have to talk to ourselves as stakeholders and not be passive waiting for others to do the work for us. Thank you very much for stressing that. Thank you. The next question will be to Ms. Shumba Kawandami. The government of Zambia adopted a new youth policy this year, ensuring youth participation at all stages of the design of the policy. Based on this example of collaboration between the youth and the government, what recommendations do you have for member states to encourage youth participation in policy making and foster partnership between government and youth?
Hello. Well, when we say that governments are representatives of the people, we actually are including everyone, including the youth. And in a country like Zambia, we actually have 64% of our population classified as the youth. That is between the ages of 15 to 35 years. During the process of developing the National Youth Policy, which is the first time we have developed one as a country, I would advise or recommend that invest time and money in it. It's going to be a long process. And of course, time and money are always in short supply. The process has to give an opportunity to as many youth as possible to participate, which is realistically each and every youth who wants to participate should be able to participate. And then, so you're going to use a bottom-up approach. And then you also have to realize that the youth are leaders today. Much as, yes, we're expecting them to lead tomorrow, they're already leading today. So they should be also able to come in and have their inputs. And as has already been said on the panel, they've used very different ways from us, well, my generation, to communicate. And then once, the other thing that we recognize is that the youth are very intelligent, they have a lot of energy, and they have a lot of passion today for what they're doing. And so that is something that we as a government believe that should be honest to make their today better, and of course to make the future better. Once you engage with the youth and you're able to address some of the challenges that are there in their lives today, that are in the country today, like things to do with health, things to do with education and skills. If you're able to sit down with the youth, address them today, you're going to find that you solve some of your future problems, if not most of your future problems. So the process I think we went through has actually been confirmation to us that the youth have to be included at every stage of formulating policy, every stage of validating policy. And as the youth in Zambia like to say, they don't want anything for them that excludes them. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for stressing the bottom-up approach. Concerned people should be involved. Thank you very much. And including at all stages also was very important. Thank you very much. Last but not least, my question for you, Galia Kudmian. You are engaged with several youth organizations. You are on the board of the Argentinian Youth Organization for the United Nations, and you represent the UNOI, which is not United Nations office, but let me state it again. It's the United Network of Young Peace Builders, right? Yes. And you are also from the American regions in the International Steering Committee. Based on these experiences, what steps should be taken to provide accessible funding and capacity building support for youth-led organizations?
Well, thank you for giving me the floor. I'm Galia, I'm from Argentina, I'm 23 years old. I integrate the board at OAHNU, the Argentine Youth Organization for the United Nations, and I also serve as international representative for the Americas region at UNOI Peace Builders. Now, to answer the question, I believe there are several steps we can take to actually provide this support in terms of funding and capacity development for youth organizations. First, we could start by simplifying application processes for these types of support. Often, these application processes and training calls require a lot of documentation and reporting mechanisms that are simply not viable for organizations that do not have that administrative capacity to do so. I believe that by being flexible on those terms, we can actually reach even deeper grassroots level initiatives and even reach those organizations that are not legally registered but are just as important. Second, I believe that these processes of support should be institutionalized. And with this, I mean that we're not looking for one-time grants. We're actually looking for a system of continuous support to ensure sustainable results. Third, I really believe that in terms of funding opportunities and in terms of this support, we actually need what has been said already, bottom-up logic. We actually, if we want to ensure this support for youth organizations, we need to ask them, I mean us, the youth, what we need. Don't just assume what we lack, but rather ask us, consult us, because we know our communities and we know our work and we know what we need. And I think there is a misconception around the youth that we are impulsive or we are improvised. And I know where that misconception stems from. I think that we're overlooked because of our emotions. Yes, we are outraged. We are collectively exhausted from dealing with the same issues that we have been dealing with for the past centuries. However, I believe that our outrage has something different. It's completely and thoroughly organized. In my 5 years as being a volunteer, I've never seen people be more analytical, more organized, and more structured than my fellow young peers. We are experts at dealing with conflict. We are experts at holding difficult conversations. And I'm talking methodology, I'm talking time management, I'm talking resource allocation. We bridge the gap between our highest ambitions and our practical capabilities. So I bring this up because what we really need from governments in terms of the support is trust. Trust our ideas, trust the way we execute these decisions that we have been making. If we continue to be overlooked as young people, as just young, we fail to be acknowledged by our power, our strength, and the responses we have already developed for these global issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this session had been so positive that we could have called it good practices for national inclusion of youth participation. We've heard really good examples of youth participation. We've heard concrete challenges that need to be tackled and addressed. And with that, I would like to move to interventions from the floor and starting with Samia Agrawal, the CEO of Youth for Peace International. Please be mindful that you will be timed for 2 minutes. Could you maybe speak closer to the mic?
Thank you. India is the largest and is one of the most resilient parliamentary democracies in the world, but sadly the current state of youth participation in Indian politics is very discouraging. 50% of the population is under the age of 30 years, but there is only one member of parliament currently under the age of 30. So the policies and decisions which directly impact the majority of India's population are discussed and voted on by men mostly with at least a 30-year average age difference. This stark underrepresentation highlights the urgent need for systemic change. Power and privilege still remains with them. So this year, we were going into the voting process and we started a movement called Youth Agenda. It was a movement where we conducted consultations and dialogues with 43,000 diverse youth leaders across organization groups and collectives. This youth agenda was not merely a document of recommendation, it was a testament to our capacity as young people to identify challenges and propose solutions. This showed the power of collaboration as this movement was funded by youth and youth-led organizations. It was the product of intensive consultations across India where the young people shared their lived experiences and aspirations. It was simple for young people that whichever political party includes their recommendation in the manifesto will be voted. Because we young people refuse to be sidelined any longer. Youth Agenda 2024 marked as the beginning of an era where participation shapes a more inclusive, equitable, and prosperous India. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I couldn't have been more accurate when it comes to pushing for youth voices at an international and a local level. I would like to invite Her Excellency Griselda Lopez, the permanent representative for El Salvador to the United Nations.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias por la invitación y agradecer también a todos los panelistas. Sin duda, muchas de las cuestiones que dijeron resuenan profundamente con la experiencia de mi país. Quisiera compartir con ustedes tres cuestiones concretas. Primero, la participación de los jóvenes en el quehacer político de nuestro país. Además de que tenemos uno de los presidentes más jóvenes de la región, nos complace que el Parlamento de El Salvador también hay un gran porcentaje de jóvenes. Estos son diputadas y diputadas que se sintieron inspirados en participar en la vida política de El Salvador para transformar al país. Pero no es solo cuestión de postularse, es cuestión de que ellos tengan estos espacios y que también la población confíe en ellos para que hagan un cambio. Y eso es sumamente importante también para que otros países sigan esta experiencia. Otra cuestión es también la creación de capacidades y liderazgos. Y esto ha sido posible en mi país gracias a los centros urbanos urbanos de bienestar y oportunidades cubos. Estos forman parte de esta estrategia de prevención de violencia, rehabilitación y reconstrucción del tejido social, pero también son lugares que son administrados en su mayoría por jóvenes. Y también son espacios donde los miembros de la comunidad pueden aprender idiomas, danzas, pero también son espacios de convivencia intergeneracional. Son también espacios de empoderamiento y en los que, como se mencionó por los panelistas, se confía en nuestros jóvenes, quienes ya son líderes y que seguirán siendo los líderes del futuro. Y como último punto, ya que estamos en Naciones Unidas, creemos firmemente en la necesidad de seguir fortaleciendo la arquitectura de Naciones Unidas que promueva la participación plena y significativa de todos ustedes, jóvenes. Esto incluye asegurar que la juventud siga siendo una prioridad para todos los órganos de Naciones Unidas, incluyendo el Consejo de Seguridad, la Comisión de la Consolidación de la Paz y muchos otros. Es crucial respaldar el papel de la recién establecida Oficina del Enviado del Secretario General para la Juventud, que ya es un importante catalizador para estas iniciativas. Los jóvenes no son solo el futuro, ustedes ya son el presente y El Salvador les está escuchando. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. I would like to invite our third and last intervention for the second dialogue, Safayed Zamil, who is the youth rights advocate, former youth advisor, and UN human rights.
Today, I'm sitting here as a proud citizen of Bangladesh, a small yet vibrant country in South Asia known for its resilience and commitment to peace. Bangladeshi people, especially its youth, have a long history of fighting against oppression and injustice. In recent times, the democratic principles that we hold dear was threatened. Yet again, it was the youth, particularly the students, who took to the streets protesting for weeks to restore democracy and justice. We have reclaimed our freedom of speech, our freedom of expression, and we are working toward a society where every voice counts. As a direct result of this youth-led movement, we now have 2 youth representatives actively participating in our interim government. This is a powerful message to the world, what young people can achieve when given the opportunity to engage in governance. However, this victory has come at a significant cost. About 1,000 people, including young boys and girls, were killed, and over 2,000 others have suffered permanent injuries. Their sacrifices serve as a stark reminder of the price we pay for freedom and justice. Today, I'm not here to glorify their death and inspire others to do the same, but I am here to ask the leaders around the world, is this the way citizen gets their constitutional rights? If so, I bet you cannot count the number of dead. We are ready to pay any price to establish our rights anywhere on the earth. Today, on behalf of the youth of the world, I stand before this distinguished assembly to call for collective action. We must establish systems that ensure the voices of young people are not only heard, but valued at the highest levels of decision making. We, the youth, are against violence, discrimination, and oppression. We long for peace, justice, and equity. Our vision is of a future where young people can contribute meaningfully to both local and global governance, working together to build a better, more just world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Safia. I think with this we are closing the first part. As Manal was saying earlier, we're having 3 parts of this discussion. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for joining us. Thank you very much for your words, for your inputs, and for the work you're doing. I hope it would inspire all of us. Thank you. Moving to the second part, I would like to introduce, and also we will be glad to have Manal, because as several regional and international organizations from Africa Europe Foundation, she's Sustainable Cooperation for Peace and Security and United Nations Intercultural Action. Manal Benani, you will be facilitating this panel.
Thank you so much. I would like to call the panelists for the second session Ahmed Al-Hajari, Ms. Anushka Sinha, Her Excellency Emma Theophilus, Nasha Coelho Cuvelier, and Venus Aves. Please join me to the stage. I would like to welcome everyone again to dialogue number 2, which will be focusing on the youth participation at the international level. In this session, we will delve into the mechanisms through which youth can influence governance, advocate for human rights, and champion peace and security. Together, let us harness the passion and creativity of youth to forge pathways for meaningful engagement in political processes. This will not be just a dialogue, it's a call for action for all of us and all generations, to unite in a pursuit of a just and equitable world. From African perspective, and because I am African, the UN Summit of the Future comes at a very crucial period for us, given the socio-economic development, political and environmental challenges that are at risk of deepening further, given the continent currently mass loss and mass crisis of human capital to end intergenerational deprivations and exclusion against a backdrop of growing debt, currently at $1.1 trillion, and deepening austerity measures. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to forge global cooperation, recalibrate the multilateral system, and reform global governance to more just and equitable processes. I am honored here today to have an exceptional group of diverse stakeholders and distinguished leaders today, because they're not only champions of youth leadership, but also they possess the expertise and the capabilities in order for us to address and tackle some of the challenges we've already discussed before, but also other challenges when it comes to youth participation at the international level. Please allow me to welcome first Ahmed Al-Hajari, who is the Education Above All youth advocate from Qatar. And I would like to ask you about the main challenges that, according to you, young people or youth face in the realization of the right to participate in international action, and what support or resources do you think they need from the states and from the UN to fully enjoy this right?
Thank you, Manal, first of all, for that beautiful introduction. And I think when we start to discuss about challenges that the youth face in realizing this right, there's a lot, but there's a few that I would like to highlight. And that first being is the lack of mentorship or capacity building and training or leadership support for the youth. So without these, many young people struggle to navigate the complexities of the global systems, and they don't have the support necessary to do that. So with that being said, they are not able to contribute effectively. Now, equally concerning also is the lack of access to meaningful platforms where the youth can engage in real dialogue. I think too often we face these symbolic representations instead of genuine participation. Our presence might be there and acknowledged, but our voices are not truly heard, and that is a problem that undermines the potential of youth-driven solutions. We see this gap, I think, firsthand in various forums or where youth and the youth voices remain on the sidelines, treated as symbolic rather than anything to do with the integral part of the conversation. So we as the youth demand a seat at a table, and we have to ensure that it's not an empty table, a table where our voices are valuable and heard and are used in decision-making processes. The international community, I think, must move forward from beyond this tokenism and recognize that the youth actually have a word to say, and a lot of times it's very valuable. So to give you a little bit of an example, I think Education Above All Foundation is a great example for this and how youth empowerment can be at the core of addressing all of these challenges that we're facing. The initiatives like the Youth Advocacy Program allows young people like myself to have access to conversations into rooms where you're able to really make a change and provide real opportunities for support. So now just to we discussed a little bit about solutions and what is the solution, and I think the solution is exactly that, to support these organizations such as EAA and other youth organizations around the world that act as a bridge. They close the gap in mentorship and trust and ensuring that the youth have platforms that they are able to speak in and actually make valuable change. And when it comes to member states and the UN, my advice to them is to really engage meaningfully with the youth. Give it a try, and only then will you be able to finally see the solutions that they can come up with. And as a global community, I think we must build on these examples for structural change. The member states and the UN, it's time to transform and to really promise a youth of participation into a reality that includes capacity building, trust, leadership, mentorship, and all of the above. And with this, we can really ensure that the voices of the youth are integral parts of shaping the future and not an afterthought. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. And if I have to summarize, I think we need to make sure that the upskilling of youth is done correctly, but then we need to also open spaces such as the Summit of the Future for more young people to engage, but to engage more meaningfully. I would like with that to ask and invite Anushka Sinha, who is the steering committee member of UNESCO Global Youth Community, an advisor at the World Bank's S4E Advisory Group, Next Generation Fellow at the United Nations Foundations, Global Young People Action Team member with the UNICEF, and a Young Justice Leader at NYU Center for International Cooperation. Sinha, allow me to ask you about your experience working with various UN constituencies. What are the opportunities to enhance and the challenge to address and, in order to boost youth participation at a global level?
Thank you so much. We live in a world where young people, just like ourselves, are often the drivers of change, but they're most often also the ones that are systemically marginalized and thrown out of these systems. My name is Anushka. As she mentioned, I've been working as an activist since I was 10 years old, so I come here today with a decade of experience of the challenges and the solutions that I have in mind. We need to first of all recognize that youth are not just the beneficiaries of policies, but active participants and leaders in governance, human rights, peacekeeping, and more. We need to also understand that governance is not just about leadership, it's about representation. It's about who that young 10-year-old sees behind the TV screen, who they can aspire to be, someone just like me or just like them. And that allows for them to take inspiration and take action for their futures. The political sphere has predominantly been reserved for older generations, but this needs to change, and it needs to change now. In order to do so, we can act simply by allowing young people to go and vote, but also giving them the opportunity to contest for elections and offices by lowering the age limits. I would love to see a young Secretary General from one of you in this room. Why not, right? Today, many youth who should be in this room are absent. They are leading the charge and the change on the grassroots level, but they're not here. Why is that? It can be due to political repression, or it can be due to these barriers such as social marginalizations or the governance processes that repress them from coming into these spaces. We cannot ignore these absences. Instead, we must recognize them and say their names in every room that we go into, raising awareness for their struggles. In solidarity, I ask all of you to say together with me, say their names. What do we say? Major hurdles today are not only limited to systemic exclusion or tokenism. Many young people, especially from marginalized communities, lack access to resources like education or platforms necessary to help them participate meaningfully. This exclusion is worsened by geographic, economic, and gender disparities, which we cannot ignore. It is not enough to invite youth to the table. It is important that we provide them with the financial support to continue to participate and contribute sustainably and effectively. Finally, we can also change this by institutionalizing youth representation in decision-making spaces such as these, by providing permanent youth seats in global organizations such as the United Nations, where young people can be a part of these decision-making processes, not just as tokens. The challenges we face today are not just interconnected, but they're global. So the solutions need to be global as well. Together, if we work with the United Front, we can work to build a prosperous future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anushka, I think you've said it so beautifully, and I think we could all, within our different capacities, make sure that youth voices are heard, and they are heard as loud and as equally to other voices of much more senior profiles. And with that, I would like to call Her Excellency Emma Theophilus, who's the Minister of Information and Communication Technology of Namibia, as well as a member of the network of young decision makers of Club de Madrid. And it's very interesting to actually have you, Minister, here today, because as we all know, Namibia is also a co-facilitator of the Summit of the Future. So I think your contribution will be very valuable to see whether and how hard we need to push for the Pact of the Future to be implemented. So how can governments leverage technology to create a more accessible and inclusive channel for youth engagement in decision-making processes, since that's your field?
Thank you so much, and a very good afternoon to everybody. Very happy to be part of this conversation where, as you have clearly indicated, Namibia is co-facilitating the Summit of the Future, and as Minister of ICT, the Pact of the Future where digital technologies are concerned is definitely up my alley, and I really have been following the negotiations and actually the deliverables we need to have to ensure that digital technologies become front and center when it comes to engaging young people in political processes and decision making, in bringing them to this decision making table we talk about, and how we can leverage those technologies to ensure that. And I think the first one would be looking at how public institutions need to understand the behaviors and characteristics of young people. I think somebody earlier spoke about the various stereotypes and myths about how young people interact, how they interact with their peers, how they interact with institutions. And I think that comes from a lack of understanding of actually being around young people and knowing that they're not a homogeneous group. They come in all different kinds of complexities and dynamics. And it's important the way we as government interact with young people, then we're able to know exactly how to meet them halfway with the right policy dialogues and with the right engagements and strategies and the channels accordingly to do so. And I think also in my interaction, being a young minister myself, when I became Deputy Minister of ICT, the first thing I encouraged every office, ministry and agency in government is to actually open up 2 social media platforms to ensure that we're able to reach a young demographic. And that was in 2020. And now almost every office, ministry and agency in Namibia has a social media page. They're able to get DMs with inquiries. They're able to interact with young people almost instantaneously. And that's very important to ensure that young people continuously get the information they need around government policies to improve their lives and to ensure there's a level of trust to be built between the young population and citizens and public institutions. So I think the core issue here is to ensure there's interactive modes and technology plays an important role with that when it comes to social media. Then, of course, I think an important one would be a facilitating participation in policy consultations and decision-making processes. My ministry is currently developing a national digitalization strategy. And I made it very clear that during the consultation process, the validation process, we need to have a call out on social media for people to actually give their inputs, and lo and behold, majority of the inputs came from young people. They're talking about the importance of privacy, the importance of data privacy, the importance of being secure online and cybersecurity matters. And I think that's the importance of actually doing that. And we see it with a wide number of networks. We have the wide network by Club de Madrid that's constantly amplifying the work of young MPs and young ministers to ensure that there is some realization and affirmation that you can be a deputy minister at 23, you can be a minister at the age of 28. It is possible. It's ensuring that when you do get to the decision-making table, you're able to bring young people along. And of course, last and not finally, I have a lot more to say, but I see my time is up. Digital technologies are very important in ensuring that we co-design and co-create policies and services in government. And I think for a person who was a youth activist before and transitioned into politics, it's very difficult to not see that most of the strategies, most of the policies are absent of a young and youthful voice, the future that is meant to shape and safeguard this policy. So technologies make it very easier to ensure that those people who cannot make it to your office, cannot make it to that consultation, can actually do so through online spaces. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. And I think maybe just one thing to all hold on to, which is when you reach higher places, make sure to bring younger people along as well. And with that, I would like to also invite another champion in youth engagement at an international level, Venus Avis, who's a member of the UN Youth Office Youth Reference Group from Philippines. And I would like to ask you about how can we actually leverage different stakeholders to cooperate, to develop and apply core principles when it comes to meaningful and representative and inclusive and safe youth representation at international and intergovernmental processes.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. In order to address that, I would like to give 4 points. First, I think the priority now should be to ensure that those left out or excluded in the plain text of the pact, such as I'm thinking of LGBTQI youth, refugee, migrant, displaced youth, are actually not left behind in the implementation. And to do that, stakeholder cooperation should lead to the sharing of best practices, the provision of technical support, the formulation of guidelines and action plans, and as well as connecting stakeholders to these social movements and listen to how they want to be engaged on their own terms. Second, I think we need to go beyond the traditional multilateral ways of working as we know it and invest in new modalities of cooperation and engagement. We need to borrow from non-Western cultural traditions, from feminist, queer, and indigenous movements. And this is why I think diversity is critical, but that we should also face the hard decision to listen to those outside the halls of the UN who are critical of the unequal multilateral order as we know it, or even fundamentally opposed to it. Third, while Article 37 of the Pact correctly affirms that engagement should be based on gender parity, balanced geographical representation, and non-discrimination, I believe we should go further in order to recognize and correct the structural inequalities that shape access to the spaces, such as on the basis of race, class, sexual orientation, gender identity, citizen status, and more. And to engage in positive discrimination when necessary. And stakeholders who have experience in this area, such as states with favorable legislation or social movements, must lead the way. And finally, wearing the hat of one of the members of the Youth Reference Group of the UN Youth Office, I believe that the UN Youth Office should be engaged in all of these processes as the expert body on meaningful youth engagement within the UN. The office should start by mapping existing practices and identifying the gaps and needs of diverse stakeholders in intergovernmental processes. The office should then engage in connecting young people with these stakeholders to ensure that meaningful youth engagement is actually implemented based on the most progressive interpretation of their core values. And finally, the UN Youth Office should serve as a platform for exchange and fora for best practices where these diverse stakeholders can connect. And finally, to do all of these, I believe that the UN Youth Office and young people and their movements should be given the resources they need to transform the UN from meaningful youth engagement to full and equal participation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Venus. And I would like to reiterate, whenever we're pushing for youth, let's make sure we leave no one behind. So let's make sure that we're as inclusive as we would like to be included in all processes. And with that, I would like to call our last panelist for the session, Nasha Coelho Cavalier from Sustainability Without Borders in Argentina, who's the co-founder and the director of the network. And I would like to ask you a question that had been already answered in some presentations, but I think it's very good that you will get the chance to say it at the end and emphasize on it, because I would like to ask you about the role of youth-focused CSOs and youth-led organizations in bringing youth voices to international fora. Please.
Thank you. So if I may, I would like to start answering that question with the context. In one sentence, The context that young people face now is fewer resources and more needs. We have less fresh water, we have less forests, we have less fertility in the soils. We have less. But also more needs, because now we have new illnesses. There is migration, there is climate change already affecting our communities. So in that context, there is also a failure of some democracies to improve young people's lives. And in my country, young people voted really angry for a climate denier. And as a climate activist, I can say that that's a really hard environment to foster climate action. But who's there when the government is not? Who's there? Sometimes are NGOs. NGOs well established, but also new NGOs. I am from the third sector of the third world, as we like to say, and it is a kind of difficult sector, to be honest, for the lack of resources mainly. But there are so many youth-led organizations. We have an initiative that is called climaps.org, and we have already mapped more than 500 organizations in Latin America only. And they are mainly youth-led. And while some leaders are like stars, they may come and go, organizations tend to last, tend to be there for communities, tend to be more rooted into the locality where actually the problems are. So my advice will be to help those NGOs to become legally constituted, to have resources to fundraise for their projects, to have visibility. And for the last, my organization is an official observer for the United Nations Framework Climate Change Convention. And that kind of status help you to get into some rooms and some conversations that are crucial to foster for a sustainable development world. That's what we want. So that will be my advice in this context, to really help NGOs to get further. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now we will be receiving interventions from different participants on the floor to conclude the participation of the youth on the international level. We'll start first with Marie-Claire Graff, co-founder of Youth Negotiators Academy.
Thank you for the panel, the excellent panels, and for all the beautiful contributions here. This was very meaningful to listen to. So I have been the youngest negotiator for the government of Switzerland, and just what Minister said, I think it's so important to really highlight that we need young people with the decision-making power and to normalize that someone at the age of 23 can actually sit on these seats. You know the advice which was told me? Under no circumstance reveal your age, because it might not be beneficial for you and people won't take you serious. And I think that's so wrong. We should stand for our age and actually cheer and celebrate that we are young and that we are here. Also, I was told to cover my stickers because it might not be appealing to the space. And I think that's also what we collectively have to contribute, that this space is way more diverse and that we all can show up in the way we feel most comfortable. So I was asking my president back then, so why have you been going out the way to bring a young person on a delegation as a negotiator with a proper mandate? So you're telling me, like, why should you just advise us? Why should you just be a delegate and kind of cover our social media stories? And why should you just be here to inspire us? I want to co-lead with you together. And I want to shift the power of how we are interacting and how we are making decisions. So in some of the reflections of today, not only on this panel, and I think we have to be very mindful of our language we are using. Let's not talk about youth engagement. Let's actually talk about youth leadership. Let's not talk about participation of young people, but actually of the rightful representation we need in these rooms. Let's not talk about young people as stakeholders, which we have to consult at one point because it's the right thing. We are actually right holders because we have the right to participate in decision-making processes. And let's not just be satisfied with the dialogues. I think you pointed this out as well. But actually with sitting at decision-making tables. And we don't need this tomorrow or in the future because that's what the future generations will do. But we need it today because we are born right now. We are here right now. So we can actually talk right now. And I think what is really crucial here that when we are coming to the space, that we are not just taking a seat at the table, but actually change the table, change the seats, and actually the menu we are talking about. Because we have seen where the current seats, chairs, and the menu brought us. And we can all agree in here that it's not exactly where we have to be, right? So I think that's really the task of all of us here, and it's so beautiful to see the diversity of people here in the room from all generations. Because also what I want to highlight, as in the opening plenary when we talked about the heart letter of participation, the most meaningful youth engagement is actually the one where it's youth-led, but in a kind of dialogue and in the decision-making or participation of decision-making with adults together. So we have an intergenerational way on how we are leading. And that's why I would like to highlight also the UNESCO, the Climate Action Network of UNESCO, where we're doing this together, and also the Academy, where we trained this year over 400 negotiators from 80 countries to really co-lead this together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Moving on with His Excellency Lauri Voyonma, Deputy Permanent Representative.
Thank you for all the panelists for sharing important, valuable insights on the meaningful participation of young people on both national and global level. And I think this point was very well made, notably by Venus Aves, how important it is to focus also on the meaningful participation of youth with disabilities and of those left behind who might not exactly be in the position to claim their rights and bring about their views on the agenda. And this is actually a cornerstone also of our Finland's efforts to really try to focus on the youth with disabilities, to advance the UPS agenda at both national and global level. As you probably know, we were among the first, or we were actually the first country to develop a national action plan on youth peace and security, and we are about to draft a new plan at the end of 2024, as the current plan comes to an end. I know this might sound a little bit bureaucratic, but we have also been sharing our concrete examples and experiences with many countries around the world, including in the south, such as Kenya and Nigeria, and these have been extremely valuable. Also, at the UN end, you might know that we took up the role of co-chairing together with the Hashemite Republic of Kingdom of Jordan, a group of member states champions of UPS. Now I think, we are about to adopt the Pact of the Future, and there we strongly believe that the participation of young people in peace and security issues cannot be compromised. There is a need to continue building on the good formulations and achievements that we have in the language of several UN Security Council resolutions. So we look forward to continuing the collaboration with the group of champions, the United Nations Youth Office, youth organizations, importantly, and others to put Action 20 of the Pact into practice. Next year, we'll have the Peace-Building Architecture Review.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I'm really sorry to interrupt, but we would like to have our last intervener, or else they will kick us out of the room.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to invite Nico Pampier, who is a representative of the major group of children and youth, to make his intervention. And please stick to the 2 minutes.
Thank you so much for the floor. As mentioned, I'm representing MGCY as a young queer peace and security champion from South Africa. Just to share, I've been very privileged to engage in these multilateral spaces, but however, there's so many young people who cannot be here. And I want to take this time to highlight that our voices matter, our perspectives matter. However, we are often, more frequently, left behind with tokenistic and minimal efforts from duty bearers to include us for shaping our future. Many of us here represent hopes, ambitions, and untapped potential of young leaders from around the world. We come to these international decision-making platforms with the goal to meaningfully engage, but I want you to look around. The people who are in this room are the ones who have access to it. And I can tell you, we can do better. The truth is that Action 37 will remain just that, an action and words on paper, unless it becomes embedded in every level of decision-making, backed with political will and dedicated resources. Meaningful youth decision-making cannot be achieved through mere tokenism. It requires member states to start taking action, to include us, not only in the conversation, but in the very fabric of the decision-making. Young people are here, we are ready, but we cannot do it alone. True intergenerational partnership is possible, but it will be too late if we continue to wait. Our future depends on our actions we take today, not tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nico, and thank you for all the interveners and all of the panelists. I couldn't be more proud as a youth activist myself, to be honest. As we are navigating the scarcity of resources, the overlapping issues, and the growing demand, I think we're doing great, each and every one of us at our capacity. And I do invite the people who are here in the room to take every single recommendation that was said here and make sure you implement it at your level and make sure you advocate for it also at your national and the international level. Thank you so much. And with that, we would like to close today's session, and we would like to introduce the second session, which will be about innovation solutions in humanitarian action, which is just another adjective for youth. We are creative and we are innovative. Thank you so much.